When people set up reef tanks with the sump and show off their new equipment on social media, they can look quite complicated with several filters, pumps, lights and so on. But it doesn't have to be that way, and I'm going to set this saltwater tank up to be as simple as possible. So today I'll show you the equipment I'll be using on this Cade Classic Reef S2 Nano 500. Before I do that though, it's disclaimer time. This tank and some of the equipment was given to me for free by Reef Aquatics in Lincolnshire, so a big thank you to them. And if you want a Cade aquarium in the UK, visit reefaquatics.co.uk for the best prices. I'm going to start with the sexiest piece of equipment on any build, the light, and I'll be using a Gen 6 Radion XR15. Now I normally like to have full coverage of light over my tanks, which can mean several light fixtures spanning the length and width of the tank. But the Gen 6 Radion boasts the best light spread in the business from a small form factor, so this should be the only light I need, as it should give maximum coverage on its own. And ultimately I'll only be keeping hardy, soft and LPS corals in this tank, so one light should be plenty. And in fact this light is actually overkill on such a small tank, so I'll probably only run it at around 30% power. And just as important as getting light right is getting flow right. But while water movement is extremely important in any reef tank, getting it right is actually really simple and doesn't have to be expensive. You just need two reasonable sized power heads, one on either side of the tank. I've gone for two Jekod SLW20s, which cost just £65 each, but despite their budget-friendly price, they don't compromise on performance. They're rated at 10,000 litres per hour each, which should give plenty for this tank that holds around 130 litres of water after displacement. And they have various flow modes, so I can create waves and random flow to my heart's content. The trick with flow is to get all corals moving nicely like this all of the time, while avoiding pointing power heads directly at your corals and aiming the power heads so there are no dead spots in the tank where detritus can settle. And you can achieve that by simply placing the power heads at the top of the tank opposite each other but slightly offset. That will create nice turbulent flow patterns for your corals while also preventing detritus from settling on your sandbed. You may need to move the power heads around a little to make sure there are no dead spots, but it really is a much simpler process than you think, and this is the perfect start point for any reef tank. And the final key area for any tank is filtration, and I'm in two minds as to what way to go on this tank. I would generally add a skimmer on most tanks I set up, but I want this tank to be silent, and most skimmers on the market are rated for much larger tanks than this. So for now at least, I'm going to start with a Clarity filter roller and nothing else. The filter roller will catch any uneaten food and remove it before it breaks down and starts to decay, and as a Brucey bonus, it will also polish my water, which should help keep it looking crystal clear. Now the sump on this Cade tank does come with built-in media baskets, which I might use for things like phosphate removing media, but because I plan on doing 25% water changes once a fortnight, I probably won't need to use phosphate removers or any other filter at all for that matter. And the idea of keeping the filtration simple really appeals to me, so as long as my nitrate and phosphate remain in check, I'll stick to this plan for filtration. So those are the key bits of equipment that will make this tank tick, but what about the other bits? For temperature, I could just put a heater in the sump, but I always prefer to use a temperature controller, so I'll be using the Reef Factory Thermo Control to keep the tank at a steady 24 degrees C. It'll be connected to a 150 watt Eheim heater and a Tunzi cooling fan to prevent heat spikes in the summer. For my return pump, the plan was to use the Ecotech Vectra S2, but the threaded connector it comes with doesn't fit the plumbing on the Cade, so until I get the right size attachment, I'll be using this Jekod MDC 5000, which I'll be running at its lowest setting of 30%. This tank comes with a built-in gravity-fed auto top-off system, so I don't need to buy a separate ATO pump, so that just leaves a dosing pump. Because I'll be transferring all my livestock over from an existing tank, I will need something to replace the calcium and alkalinity my corals consume from day one. Now I'll be dosing Calquasser on this tank because it is very cheap, very simple, and most importantly has a track record of keeping corals healthy and growing fast. For now, I'll use a Reef Factory single dosing pump to add the Calquasser to the tank, and that will be totally fine, but I might upgrade to the more heavy duty Ecotech Versa if I find I need to dose lots more Calquasser as my corals grow. And that really is all the equipment I'll be using on this tank. There's no need for several filters or complicated aquarium controllers, just good light, good flow, simple filtration, and water changes. And if you want to follow my journey with this tank, make sure you like and subscribe, and until next time, happy reefing.